My old homeowners association led by the Queen of Overreach decided to schedule and advertise a fancy wedding at my ancestral ranch. The kicker was I had not even fully sold the place yet, and the main ranch house, the so-called venue, was just days away from being demolished by my crew under my orders as part of the land sale agreement. So what is a guy supposed to do when hit with that level of audacity? Well, the wedding planners, the happy couple, and most of all the HOA president got a surprise. That morning, drop a comment if an HOA ever tried pulling something wild on you, and let me know where you are watching from, because this story is off the rails and you are going to want every detail. My name is Alex Mason, and for most of my adult life I worked as a project manager, mainly in commercial construction. Timelines, budgets, contracts, and tough people are what I handle every day. Little did I know those same skills would be perfect for dismantling the delusions of Brenda Carmichael, president of the Oakhaven Estates Homeowners Association. The land in question was Willow Creek Ranch. It had been in my family for more than 100 years, long before Oakhaven Estates and its perfect lawns crept up to the hills around our land. The ranch house was, let's be generous, rustic. In truth, it was falling apart, a pretty piece of history, but not livable. My grandfather was the last to stay there, and since he passed it had been sitting silent, a reminder of simpler times. The land itself, though, was valuable, prime for development, and after long thought I chose to sell. One key term insisted on by the buyer, who wanted a clean slate, was that all structures, including the house and some collapsing sheds, had to be demolished and cleared at my expense before closing. I had already signed the contract, permits were in process, and demolition was scheduled. Brenda Carmichael, even saying her name feels like tasting something bitter. She was the self-crowned ruler of Oakhaven Estates. Imagine hair stiff enough to bounce bullets, oversized gold jewelry clinking with every dramatic move, and a spotless white Escalade. She drove around the neighborhood like a yacht. Her clothes were expensive but awful, trying way too hard to look like old money but coming off more like new money with bad taste. She lived for the HOA rules, or rather her twisted version of them, which usually meant bossing people around far beyond legal limits. For years she had been a nuisance, sending petty notes about how the ranch fence looked next to Oakhaven, even though my land existed before her HOA and technically outside its control. I mostly ignored her, filing her drama under not my problem, my land, my rules, or so I thought. I found out Brenda had taken her nonsense to a whole new level by complete accident. I was scrolling a local Facebook group, the kind full of lost cats and complaints about trash cans, when I saw an ad, host your dream wedding at the historic Willow Creek Ranch Pavilion. It said, with a photo of my broken-down barn taken in the right light to look magical and hiding the worst parts. The word pavilion was her invention. It was a barn, plain and falling apart. I would not trust it to hold a picnic, let alone a wedding of 100 people. The ad listed dates, packages, and a number to call, which of course led to the Oakhaven HOA office. My blood boiled. They were promoting my land, my falling barn, as a wedding venue, and even gave a date: Saturday, June 14th, less than 3 weeks away, and just 2 days after demolition was to begin. My first call was to Brenda. I got her number from a poor soul stuck on the HOA board. Her voice when she answered was syrupy, fake, and smug. "Mr. Mason," she said like I was a child. "What a surprise." I told her calmly I had seen the ad for weddings at Willow Creek, and as the owner I found that very confusing, since I had approved nothing and the buildings were about to be torn down. She actually laughed. "Oh, Mr. Mason, always so literal," she said. "We saw a lovely old space just sitting there and thought, why not use it for the community, help the Oakhaven image, raise funds for beautification, even help your land sell better. Think of it as free marketing." Her voice used fake concern. The pure nerve left me speechless for a second. She was treating my private land like some shared community shed she could just take over anytime she wanted. "Brenda," I said, my voice low and sharp, "that land is mine. You are trespassing, and you are committing fraud by offering services for something you do not own, and that will not even be standing in a few weeks." She let out a dramatic sigh like I was the problem. "Really, Mr. Mason, such negativity. The community supports this. Maybe you should try being more community-minded." Then she informed me with fake cheer she had a critical HOA meeting about petunia color palettes, and hung up. My next call was to Tom Armitage, my lawyer, sharp, direct, and loyal to our family for decades. After I filled him in, there was a pause, then a low whistle. "Alex," he said, "in 30 years I have seen some HOA disasters, but this might take the crown for bold stupidity." He confirmed what I already knew: they had no right, no claim, and were skating into legal disaster, fraud, misrepresentation, and a whole list of offenses. "Document everything, Alex," he told me. "Every message, every ad, every interaction. Get that demolition permit in place. This is not just overreach, this is war." The battle line was clear. Brenda mistook my silence for weakness, my hands-off approach for indifference. She was about to learn what a project manager with a grudge and a mission looks like. The game was on, and I had A clear path forward. Tom was almost excited at the chance to bring Brenda down. This is not just about land rights, Alex, he said with that gleam he usually saved for cross-examinations. This is about arrogance, unchecked power, and mind-melting entitlement. We are going to teach them what boundaries mean. First step, he wrote a cease and desist letter that could probably peel paint, but before sending it he wanted more. Let them keep digging their own hole, he said, and I agreed. So that Saturday I headed to Willow Creek Ranch, acting like I was just checking in. What I saw made my blood boil. Fresh tire marks that were definitely not mine ran across the drive near the barn. I spotted a glossy brochure, not a homemade flyer but a full-color pamphlet from Ever After Weddings. Inside was a floor plan for a Carmichael Henderson wedding. They had actual clients. This was real, not just Brenda's fantasy. The house was quiet, but I felt like it had been violated. That afternoon I bought motion-activated trail cameras, high-quality ones that hunters use. I placed them all around, hidden in the trees and ivy. They would record and upload everything. If Brenda came back I would know it and have proof. Back at my office I checked the demolition permit. It had been approved the week before. Demolition was set for Thursday, June 12th. The wedding, according to the ad, was Saturday, June 14th. The timing was perfect. Sal Moretti, my contractor, had already confirmed he was good to go. I made a mental note to explain the wild situation to him. Sal loved this kind of chaos. And then the camera started doing their job. Within 2 days I had video of Brenda's white Escalade pulling up to the barn. She stepped out in a loud floral dress and a massive straw hat big enough to catch radio signals. With her were two worried-looking people holding clipboards. I guessed they were from the wedding company. The footage caught Brenda waving her arms, pointing at rotten beams and termite-filled walls, talking about vintage charm and natural light coming through the holes in the roof. She looked so proud, completely ignoring the fact she was trespassing and selling a fantasy. The sound was faint, but I caught phrases like plenty of space for parking, fairy lights here, catering over there by the mostly dead bushes. I labeled and saved every video with dates and times. This was not just evidence, this was a case study in arrogance. Meanwhile, Tom tried to get a copy of the wedding contract. He sent polite requests to the HOA and got nothing. Then a reply from Brenda: all documents are internal, HOA use only, we trust. This clears it up. It only confirmed she was stonewalling. But then fate stepped in. My neighbor Mrs. Gable, a retired teacher who hated Brenda, told me her daughter had a friend in the wedding party. Through that chain I got a copy of the rental contract. It was redacted but clear enough. It named Willow Creek Ranch Pavilion as the venue, listed the HOA as the one renting it, and described services that would be impossible to provide in a broken-down barn. The fee, according to the grapevine, was $5,000 paid straight to the HOA Beautification Fund, which everyone knew was just Brenda's stash for pet projects like putting gold handles in the HOA bathrooms. My internal thoughts were bouncing between laughing and pure rage. How could someone be this bold, this lost in her own fantasy? Brenda was not just bending the truth, she was building a whole fake world and charging people to visit it. Did she think some magic wedding fairy was going to swoop in and turn that place into a castle overnight? It was both absurd and illegal. I was done playing nice. This was bigger than a wedding. This was about stopping someone who had trampled on every boundary. Just when I thought it could not get more ridiculous, I got a letter from the HOA signed by Brenda. Of course, it was a formal violation notice claiming my ranch was unsafe and unattractive and demanding I fix it for upcoming community events. The hypocrisy was so thick I could have cut it with a spoon. I filed the letter with my growing stack of evidence. It was almost poetic. She was demanding I clean up a place she was illegally using and that I was about to legally level. The HOA board, as far as I could tell, were nothing more than Brenda's trained poodles. I tried once to reason with one of them, a nervous accountant named Gerald. When we ran into each other at the grocery store, he just wrung his hands, muttered something about Brenda knowing best and the importance of community cohesion, then scurried off like a scared rabbit, terrified of her. They were all enablers, not just passive but fully complicit through their cowardice. But my focus stayed on Brenda. She was the one who built this circus, and she was the one who would pay the price. The week of the wedding and the demolition arrived with tension in the air, at least for me. Brenda, on the other hand, acted like she was planning a royal gala. My trail cameras caught everything. Florists, looking lost, wandered around with measuring tapes, staring at support beams that could fall over from a strong breeze. Caterers tried to figure out how to cook without a kitchen water or electricity. It was chaos in slow motion, and Brenda in the middle of it all, dressed like a bargain bin goddess, barking orders like a delusional monarch. The champagne fountain goes here, she probably said, gesturing to a patch of poison ivy and the string quartet under that big oak with the massive hornet's nest. The footage was hilarious and maddening at the same time. Tom had finally delivered the hammer, a cease and desist letter crafted with surgical precision, 5 pages of legal thunder listing every one of Brenda's violations: property law, trespassing, fraud, contract breach, all of it laid out with zero room for argument. Attached was the county-approved demolition permit and a very clear warning that any attempt to enter the property or hold an event would lead to legal consequences and immediate police action. We sent it certified mail to her home, the HOA office, and every board member. We even hand-delivered one to the wedding planners ever after weddings, who responded with a panicked phone call to Tom. They were backing out, citing HOA misrepresentation. One less mess to deal with, though I did feel bad for the couple who had no idea what they were caught in. Brenda's response was as smug as it was predictable. She did not even bother replying to Tom. Instead, she sent me a short email dripping with superiority. "Mr. Mason, I have received some overly dramatic correspondence from your lawyer," she wrote. "Oak Haven Estates remains committed to community enrichment. Willow Creek Ranch Pavilion is a cherished landmark, and its use is supported by the neighborhood. Any attempt to interfere with the wedding will be seen as sabotage and vandalism. We trust you will behave accordingly." She ended it by warning me that the bad publicity alone should be enough to keep me in line. Her audacity was almost admirable. She was calling me a vandal for demolishing my own collapsing barn on my own land while she was trespassing, lying, and renting out the place like she owned it. I did think briefly about warning the bride and groom, but Tom talked me out of it. "Let her dig her own grave, Alex," he said. "Contacting them now just gives her a new story to spin. Our job is to protect your land. The wedding fallout is her responsibility, not yours." He was right. My priority was clear: deliver a clean site on time and stop Brenda. On Wednesday, June 11th, the day before demolition, I met with Sal Moretti and his foreman Gus. We walked the site. Gus barely said a word, just looked over the old house with a raised eyebrow. I explained everything: Brenda, the HOA, the fake venue, the cease and desist, and her refusal to back down. Sal grinned as I talked. By the time I finished, he was chuckling. "Boss," he said, shaking his head, "I have demolished crack houses, strip malls, mansions, but never a wedding venue, while the HOA president who booked it watches. That is beautiful." We made the plan. His crew would arrive quietly before dawn on Saturday, the wedding day. They would stage the equipment out of sight and wait. No work would start until I gave the go-ahead. Once Brenda and her wedding crew arrived and the situation was made crystal clear: "We will stay out of sight until you say go, Alex," Sal told me with a smile. "Then we will move fast. That barn will be dust before they even figure out what hit them." His eyes sparkled with mischief and pure professional joy. He was clearly enjoying this more than he should. Friday the 13th rolled in, and it felt like something out of a movie. The air was thick with tension. I barely slept that night, going over everything again and again: the deed to Willow Creek Ranch, the notarized demolition agreement, the official county permit, copies of the HOA ads, Facebook screenshots, trail cam videos of Brenda trespassing, Tom's cease and desist letter, and the proof it had been delivered. It was all in order. The storm was coming, and I was ready for it. And even her latest email, full of threats, was saved and filed, part of my arsenal, my evidence, my smoking gun collection. My trail cameras had picked up more activity. Just past midnight, a van with no known company logo crept up the driveway and dropped off a stack of metal folding chairs and a flimsy arch wrapped in plastic ivy. It was sad, really, an amateur last-ditch scramble, probably orchestrated by Brenda herself, trying to will a wedding into existence from nothing. I cataloged everything, every frame of footage. Brenda was not just going to be proven wrong, she was going to be exposed in full view, completely and publicly. The showdown was coming, and I was more than ready for it. Saturday, June 14th dawned cool and clear, the kind of day people write poems about, perfect for a wedding, or as fate would have it, a demolition. I arrived long before sunrise, parking my truck down an old access road covered by pines a few hundred yards from the barn. The air was still, the earth damp and heavy with the scent of dew and rotting wood. It felt like standing in the eye of a storm, one about to break, with the roar of diesel engines and splintered beams. Sal Moretti and his crew were already in position, 2 excavators and a bulldozer tucked neatly behind what remained of a stone paddock wall. Sal waved from the cab of his pickup, coffee in hand and a grin just tugging at the corners of his mouth. It was 5 in the morning, and yet he looked like a kid about to unwrap the best gift ever. The only thing we were waiting for was the guest of honor. The first vehicle arrived right on cue, a sleek black sedan. From it stepped a woman in a sharp business suit holding a tablet, her face tight with stress. The new wedding planner, perhaps either very brave or very clueless. She looked at the barn, at the overgrown weeds, at the absence of power and water, and her expression cracked. She started pacing, speaking quickly into her phone, trying to keep it all together. Then came the florist's van followed by a catering truck. Drivers climbed out, looked around and clearly wished they hadn't. What they saw was not the idyllic rustic venue Brenda had promised but a condemned mess on the verge of collapse. Sal walked over to them slow and steady in his work boots and vest. He spoke politely but firmly, explaining the site was closed, private and under imminent demolition. Their confusion turned quickly into panic. And then, like some absurd royal entrance, the pearl-white Escalade swept up the driveway at a diagonal, nearly blocking the whole entrance. Brenda stepped out in a powder blue gown, her hair shellacked into place, her smile bright and victorious until she saw Sal, then the excavator, then me. Her smile vanished, her eyes narrowed. What she said, every word sharp as glass, is going on here. I am Brenda Carmichael, president of the Oak Haven Estates Homeowners Association. There is a wedding scheduled here. Today you need to leave immediately. That was my cue. I stepped out from behind the wall, folder in hand. Morning, Brenda, I said evenly. There is no wedding here today. This land is still mine, and this is Sal Moretti from Moretti Demolition. We have a valid county-issued permit, and this house and the barn you keep pretending is a pavilion are coming down today. Her face cycled through confusion, disbelief, fury, and finally settled into full-blown rage. You can't, she screamed. This is sabotage. I will have you arrested. I will sue you into the ground. You are ruining a wedding, you monster, you vandal. She stormed towards Sal like she thought she could block a bulldozer with her bare hands. He stood still, arms crossed, amused as she waved her phone in the air, screaming, I'm calling the police. You will be dragged out of here in cuffs. True to form, about 15 minutes later, 2 county sheriff deputies pulled up looking exhausted. Before even stepping out of the car, Brenda went full victim mode, rushing toward them. Thank goodness, officers, this man, she pointed a glittering shaking hand at me, is illegally trying to destroy a historic building during a wedding. He is trespassing. He is a menace. I calmly stepped forward. Good morning, officers, I said. Here is the deed to this property. Here is the valid demolition permit issued 2 days ago, and here is the cease and desist letter sent to MS Carmichael and the HOA 5 days ago, complete with return receipt. The senior deputy, a tired-looking man, examined the papers carefully, then looked at Brenda and said, Ma'am, it appears Mr. Mason is fully within his rights. This is private land with a valid demolition order. You and the wedding party are the ones trespassing. I suggest you leave now. Brenda looked like someone had dumped ice water on her head. But the wedding, the guests, the community? The deputy shook his head firmly. That is between you and the couple, ma'am. Right now you need to vacate. And right on cue, a limousine rolled up, followed by a trail of wedding guests. The bride stepped out, radiant but already anxious. She looked around at the bulldozers, the patrol cars, and Brenda, frozen mid-meltdown. Her expression fell. Her father, a tall, stern man, approached me and asked quietly, what in God's name is going on? Even Brenda's latest email, brimming with veiled threats and smug defiance, was tucked safely in my evidence folder. My arsenal was complete. That night, my trail cameras captured a final act of desperation. An unmarked van crept up the drive under cover of darkness, unloading a stack of cheap folding chairs and a sad excuse for an arch wrapped in plastic ivy. It reeked of last-minute panic. Brenda was still trying to cobble together a fantasy wedding out of splinters and weeds. I saved the footage, of course. This wasn't just about proving her wrong, it was about exposing her, thoroughly and without mercy. The stage was set, and I was more than ready for the curtain to rise. Saturday, June 14th dawned cool and clear. The kind of morning poets call perfect. Ideal, perhaps, for a wedding, or in our case, a demolition. I arrived before sunrise, parking down an overgrown access road a few hundred yards from the barn, hidden by thick pines. The air was still, damp with dew, and carried the bittersweet scent of rotting timber. It felt like standing in the eye of a storm. The kind powered by diesel and reinforced steel. Sal Moretti and his crew were already on site, true to their word. 2 excavators and a bulldozer stood quietly behind a crumbling stone wall, like sleeping giants waiting for their cue. Sal gave me a thumbs up from his truck, coffee in hand, grinning like a man about to enjoy himself. And then the guests began to arrive. First came a sleek black sedan. A woman in a sharp suit stepped out, tablet in hand, eyes scanning the property with growing horror. A replacement wedding planner, most likely, either bold or unaware of the storm she was walking into. Then came the florist's van, followed by the caterers. Confusion painted every face. This was not the charming rustic venue they'd been promised. This was a condemned structure hours away from collapse. Sal wandered over and, with a calm but firm tone, informed them the property was closed. Private. Under demolition. Phones came out. Panic set in. Then came the pearl-white Escalade, slicing through the gravel with all the arrogance it could muster. Brenda Carmichael stepped out like suburban royalty, wearing a powder blue mother-of-the-bride gown that looked like it came with its own mortgage. Her smile, smug, imperious, lasted exactly 3 seconds. She spotted Sal. Then the machines. Then me. Her face contorted. "What," she said, each syllable dripping ice, "is the meaning of this? I am Brenda Carmichael, president of the Oak Haven Estates HOA. There is a wedding scheduled here today. You need to leave. Immediately." I stepped out from behind the wall, folder in hand. "Actually, Brenda," I said, voice calm, "there isn't. This is still my property. And this," I gestured towards Sal, who tipped his hard hat, "is Sal Moretti. We have a valid, county-issued demolition permit. And this house, along with your so-called pavilion, is coming down. Today." Her expression twisted from disbelief to fury in seconds. You can't," she shrieked. "This is sabotage. I'll have you arrested. I'll sue you for every penny. You're ruining a wedding. You're a monster." She charged towards Sal as if she could stop a bulldozer with indignation alone. He didn't move, just stood there mildly entertained. "I'm calling the police," she screamed. And she did. 15 minutes later, 2 county sheriff's deputies arrived. Brenda met them in full meltdown, crocodile tears in her eyes, pointing at me like I'd burned down a church. "This man is demolishing a historic building, during a wedding. He's trespassing." I calmly opened my folder. "Officers," I said, "here's the deed. Here's the valid demolition permit. And here," I handed them the cease and desist letter, "is a formal legal notice sent to Brenda and the HOA, warning them this property was being demolished today. Signed, receipt included." The senior deputy studied the paperwork carefully, then turned to Brenda. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "he's well within his rights. This is private property. And he has a permit. You and the wedding party are the ones trespassing. You need to leave now." Brenda looked like she'd been struck. "But, the wedding? The guests?" The deputy shook his head. "That's a civil matter, ma'am. Not a criminal one. Not our jurisdiction." And just then the limo rolled in. The bride stepped out, radiant, until her eyes landed on the machines, the deputies, and Brenda mid-breakdown. Her face fell. Her father stormed up to me. "What in God's name is going on?" he demanded. I explained calmly, handing him copies of the cease and desist and Brenda's own smug email dismissing it. His face darkened, not at me but at Brenda. "You knew," he growled at her. "You knew this might happen, and you let it." The bride began to cry. It was genuinely heartbreaking. I felt a twinge of guilt. But Brenda had forced this collision course. Sal chose that moment to give the signal. One of the excavators roared to life. With a thunderous crunch, its steel bucket slammed into the porch. Wood shattered, glass exploded, and the roof caved in like a paper diorama. The demolition had begun. Brenda let out a noise somewhere between a scream and a dying banshee. Her fantasy had crumbled into dust. Guests arrived in confused trickles, greeted not by champagne and string quartets but by bulldozers and wreckage. Sal's crew moved fast, professionals, every one of them. The groan of collapsing timber replaced any trace of wedding day serenity. Within hours, the ranch house, Brenda's faux historic pavilion, was rubble. The barn, her precious rustic backdrop, fell beam by termite-infested beam. The wedding was over before it began. The aftermath was brutal. Furious parents demanded refunds. Lawsuits were threatened, against Brenda and the HOA. Caterers, florists, musicians, none of them cheap, had been misled by a fraud. Local social media erupted. First confusion, then outrage, then pure schadenfreude. Thanks in large part to a very vocal Mrs. Gable who live-blogged the entire collapse from her porch. The fallout came fast. An emergency HOA board meeting was called that very night. I didn't attend, of course, but Mrs. Gable gave me the play-by-play over coffee the next morning. Brenda tried to bluff her way out, blaming me, blaming Sal, blaming her second-string wedding planner. But it didn't stick. Not with the cease and desist on the record. Not with the board members who admitted they'd seen it. Not with the mountain of evidence. And that's when Gerald, the timid accountant from the grocery store, finally found his backbone. Maybe it was fear of personal liability. Maybe just a long overdue moral awakening. But he stood up. And he brought receipts. Emails. Memos. Proof Brenda had lied to the board, dismissed warnings and authorized HOA funds, paid to her cousin no less, for venue enhancements that never happened. It was the final nail in the coffin. Brenda Carmichael was forced to resign as HOA president. Effective immediately. Rumors swirled about restitution. About legal settlements. I never confirmed the details. But her escalade was suddenly a rare sight in the neighborhood. When she did appear, the haughty glare was gone, replaced by a hunted, hollow stare. Her reign was over. Oak Haven changed almost overnight. A new interim board was installed, reasonable, transparent. They launched a full audit. Brenda's pet projects were quietly shelved. The community breathed a collective sigh of relief. My demolition wrapped ahead of schedule. The site was cleared, clean and ready for sale. The new buyer, a developer, thanked me for cleaning up the HOA mess before the papers were signed. Looking back, the whole thing still feels surreal. That Brenda genuinely believed she could run a wedding business on someone else's condemned property still boggles my mind. But I learned something important. Never underestimate entitlement. And never underestimate what you can accomplish with preparation, solid evidence, and a demolition crew on standby. So that's how I ended up bulldozing a wedding venue on the morning of the ceremony, and accidentally liberating an entire neighborhood from an HOA tyrant. Now it's your turn. What's the wildest HOA story you've ever heard? Drop it in the comments. And hey, if you enjoyed this tale of justice served with a wrecking ball, hit like and subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from. Thanks for watching. See you next time.